Hi, it's Bimerzen with another video, and in this video I will be doing a teardown on this BMW's N43 engine. I just removed this engine from this 1 Series BMW that I bought. When I bought it, it had some engine issues, so it would crank but it would not start, or it would start intermittently. And when I did some diagnosing, I realized that there was a serious issue. So I found bearing material inside of the oil filter, and this oil filter was also totally destroyed. There's actually holes inside. So when I proceeded to remove the intake and exhaust camshafts, I realized that something was quite wrong. As you can see, there's plenty of scoring marks on the running surfaces, and also here on the bearing shells. They are not in the best of condition. I have a separate video on this. If you're interested, I'm gonna put it down in the description and up in the card. I also have a video on how to remove the transmission and the engine from a 1 Series, so check it out if you are interested in that sort of thing. So I've decided to pull the engine and inspect the bottom end and see if I can rebuild this engine. The engine is on the engine hoist, and before I can move it over to my engine stand, I need to remove the wiring harness, and I also need to remove the starter motor because this part protrudes outwards and I cannot mount it on the stand. Damn. And I can finally remove this whole thing. Oh God. Now I have to remove the starter. I'm also going to remove both NOx sensors. And now I should be able to get the engine on the engine stand. With the engine safely on the engine stand, I can now do the teardown, and the teardowns usually start on the top side. However, I already did the diagnosis on this engine, so I know the damage on the top side. So I am more interested in the damage on the bottom side and if I can reuse this engine. So I'm going to start by removing the oil pan and work my way all the way to the crankshaft. And at the end, I'm going to take a look at the top side, so the cylinder head, all of the camshafts and the bearing surfaces. So I'm going to have a complete picture of the state of this engine. So right away I can see that there is a little bit of an oil leak here on the gasket between the oil filter housing and the engine block. This is very common. This is a very cheap gasket and an easy job to replace it. And if you see this kind of oil seepage on this side, then you know that this gasket here needs to be replaced. And if you do that, it's also a good idea to replace the gasket between the oil cooler and the housing, because this can also leak. The N43 engines have electronically controlled oil pressure, and that is achieved by controlling this solenoid here. So I want to remove this solenoid first and see how clogged it is, because this is usually quite a good indicator of the state of the oiling system. Well, it's totally stuck. It's going slowly. I don't want to break this plastic attachment here. Okay, let's see what we have. Surprisingly little debris. Wow. I'm very surprised. It's not too bad. Let's give it a spritz of brake clean. So it has some particles in there, but it doesn't look like it's totally clogged. I mean, I've seen much, much worse. It's not that bad. Okay, I'm going to continue by removing this engine mount. I'm also going to remove this AC compressor bracket. Now I'm going to turn the engine around and remove the oil pan. I want to do this in this orientation so that any oil that's left in the oil pan will not spill all over the place. And this way it should just pool at the bottom. By the excessive amount of RTV gasket on the oil pan, it's definitely clear that somebody already did something at the bottom of this engine. Maybe the gasket was replaced or there was some other work done, but this amount of RTV silicone doesn't look like a very good job. Last bolt. Okay. Well, as I suspected, the amount of silicone on this gasket is insane. Well, this is not how you do this job. If you get this much silicone inside of the oil pan, it's gonna fall off and get into the oil pickup line and it can block it. So you can see these large pieces that can fall off and get stuck, and that can ruin your engine. Look at this, for example. Look at this chunk of silicone. Wow. Nasty. Okay, let's see if we have any debris inside the oil pan. Oh, uh-oh. Uh-oh. No! Yeah, we have chunks. We definitely have chunks. And look at all of this nice copper sheen on the oil. Well, this looks like pieces of the plastic chain guide. Yep, this is the chain guide. So I'm not sure if this is from the existing chain guide or maybe the chain guide broke before and they just replaced it without dropping the oil pan and cleaning all of this debris. Okay, so let's try and get it out. Here are all the pieces that I got out of the oil pan. And it all looks to be plastic parts and some silicone. Okay, and the oil is totally contaminated by copper material. Look at this. Look at the color of this residue. Nice lead and copper. Nasty. I got the engine upside down now and of course made a huge mess, but let's just carry on. So I was mentioning too much RTV silicone. You can see that whoever did this job was totally into RTV. Also inside of the engine is touched by the RTV. Look at this. Let's continue by removing the oil pickup. I can actually hear some pieces inside of the screen mesh in the oil pickup. Let's try and get it out. Oh yeah. See, this is what kills your engine. Yeah, uh-oh. We have our first metal part. There's a nice flake of metal here. And it looks like copper. So I guess we already have some answers. It looks like that the chainrail guide broke and all of these pieces clogged the oil pickup, and that could be the cause of oil starvation and bearing damage. So don't let this happen to your engine. If you have a chance, every 10 or 15 years you should replace the plastic chainrail guide or you risk destroying your engine. And they keep on coming. Yeah, it looks like this oil pickup was pretty much clogged up. Look at all this. Next, I have to remove this whole assembly with the balancing shafts and the oil pump, and to do that I have to remove this little chain that drives the oil pump, and to do that I first have to remove this pulley on the crankshaft, and then I will be able to remove this little plug here and get to the bolt that holds the tensioner for the little chain. Wow, they're pretty rusted out. This will not work. Then I have to remove the plug. And this way I can get to that 10mm bolt. And of course my tool is too thick to get to this tight hole. Luckily this small socket is thinner and it fits. Now I have to remove the nut on the oil pump, and this is a reverse thread, which means you have to turn it clockwise to loosen it. Now I can pry away the sprocket on the oil pump. And it's loose. Now I can release the bolts. And now I should be able to lift up the whole assembly. Let's try to rotate the engine and see what happens. Huh. Well, okay. That's a sound. Oh yeah. Boys, we got him. Now we know which bearing it is. It's definitely this conrod bearing. I can hear it, I can see it moving. So we know that cylinder number 4 is problematic. The discoloration is apparent, so you can see the transition from normal color to this overheated steel color. So yeah, this is the culprit. Let's remove the bearing shell. Oh yeah, it's definitely spun. Here's the bearing shell. And here's the nastiness. The surface on the crankshaft, oh yeah, whoa, totally destroyed. I don't think this will buff out. Let's try and get the bottom shell out. Here it is. Yeah, not good. Now I'm going to remove the rest of the bearing shells on the con rods. Let's see the condition they're in. This is the number one. And doesn't look great because this shouldn't be in this orientation. Looks like I have spun bearing on number one cylinder also. Well, this one doesn't want to go apart. Oh yeah, that's a spun bearing. Let's move number two and number three into position. Let's see what we have. Yay, we don't have a spun bearing. Although, yeah, it's not in a very good condition. And number three cylinder. And we have another spun bearing. So the bearing shell not on the cup. Nasty. Oh my god, look at this material right here. So we have one nice bearing. Now I have to remove the central bolt on the crankshaft to remove the hub, and that will release the chains. And to do that, I will have to use a special tool, and it has to be strong because this bolt is totally nuts to remove. Okay, that's enough. I took out the oil pump chain tensioner and the sprocket. Unfortunately, I did break it, but it looks like it's done anyway. I will be using a long cheater bar for this. And let's see if I'm strong enough. Nope. Let's change the angle. Okay, I think we got it. Now I can remove the hub. The hub holds the sprockets for the chains, so I can remove the sprocket. And I'm also going to remove the chain and the sprocket for the oil pump. Now I'm going to undo the 13mm bolts that are holding the cradle. Before I continue removing the cradle, I have to remove the bolts on the water pump and this little bracket here. Now I'm going to use the cheater bar again to remove the 17mm bolts. They are pretty tight. They are torque to yield and they need to be replaced if you are reassembling the engine. Now I'm going to pry it apart. Well, I guess I forgot one. Yummy. Let's try again. Okay, it's loose. The rear main seal was still holding on for dear life, but I've managed to loosen it, and here goes the cradle. Okay, let's see the situation on the crankshaft. There's definitely something going on here. Not the best of signs, but it also doesn't look too bad. Nothing that catches the fingernail. Let's check the bearing number 2. And this one looks a bit rough. So this one didn't run well. So it's not smooth. This should be mirror finish. Let's see the journal number 3. Well, it's not mirror finish, but there aren't any deep grooves inside. Let's check number 4. Again, not the smoothest finish, but nothing that catches the fingernail. And the last journal looks pretty good to me. It's not bad. Let's remove the front and the rear seal. And now I can remove the crankshaft. I've got everything laid out on my workbench, so let's check the bearings. These are the main bearings, and to be honest, they don't look that bad. I was expecting much worse. So the number 1, it has some wear. It has some embedded material. Also number 2, some scratches. You could definitely see that there was a lot of material in the oil, and that material got embedded in the softer layers of the bearing shells. So this is the number 4, and this is the number 5. And here's the upper section of the engine block, and also here it's not as much damage as I expected. Here you can see there's a little piece of debris right here. So also the upper section of the engine block, not too bad. However, let's check the number 4 conrod. Yeah, look at those scratches. They look pretty deep, and they can definitely be felt with the fingernail. So these conrods are most probably unusable. Let's check number 3. It's not as bad. Number 2 was the best one. So you can see that there's only a slight thin layer of bearing material or bearing coating embedded on the surface. But this one is probably still good. Let's check the number 1 con rod surface again doesn't look to be in a particularly good condition. Nothing that catches, oh yeah, this does. This definitely catches the fingernail. So the con rods are done, they need to be replaced. You cannot just replace one con rod, they come in sets and you have to replace all 4 of them. Even if you are replacing them from a used engine, replace all of them and make sure that they are oriented in the same manner. Here are the con rod caps, and you can see if I just stack them together that they're all pretty black except this one, and this is the good one. So we can be pretty sure that this got really hot. Here are the number 1 con rod bearings. There are huge gouges missing from the surface, so yeah, that's destroyed. This is the good one. Well, it's not good anymore, but the best one. And here's number 3. It's basically same horrible condition. And this is the worst one, number 4. It's totally destroyed. You can also see that these latches here, they are straightened because the shells were rotating inside of the bore. So yeah, this is what prevents the bearing from rotating around. Now let's check the crankshaft. We have good bearing surface on the main, on the number 1. It's pretty smooth. This could still be usable. However, this, wow, you can actually see some pieces of debris inside. So this gets clogged and it stops oiling, and this is what happens. So this is destroyed. It's overheated over here. And again, the main caps are in a pretty good state. So all the mains are good, and all except one of the con rod pins are destroyed. You can see how much material is missing. Yeah, this will definitely not be reused. You cannot ground this. So this crankshaft is now an ornament. Now I want to check if the oil pump is okay, and I want to check for any excessive wear or damage, and I also want to clean it out. And the bad news is that this comes as a complete unit, so you cannot just replace the oil pump. You have to replace the whole assembly together with the balancing shafts. Not sure why that is, but the manual states that it cannot be replaced separately. First, there are 4 bolts that I need to remove, the 2 at the front and 1 here on the side and 1 at the back. Next, I have to remove the 4 torque screws. Now I have to pry apart the housing because it is made out of 2 pieces and it is pressed together with a couple of dowel pins. And I'm gonna try something. So I've put the screws back into the housing and I've left about 1 millimeter of space. And I'm gonna try and tap it here. Let's see if this works. Yeah, we have a little bit of a gap here. So I think this is gonna work. Okay, so this kind of worked. I have just a little bit of a gap here. Now I'm going to use a flat screwdriver and gently pry it apart. Now I can take out the driving shaft, and it doesn't look to be in too bad of a condition. There are some signs of wear here, but nothing too major. Here's the pump, and you can see how it works. If I rotate the shaft, it changes the displacement on one side, and this causes the suction and the pressure buildup. And this is a variable pump because you can see there's a spring here, and there's an oil channel going in this chamber underneath, and when the oil pressure is applied underneath, it compresses the spring, and this makes the pump run more centric, which means that there's a less difference in displacement in one rotation. So this is how the variable displacement pump works. It's kind of complicated, but it's an elegant solution. So now I am going to take this apart and clean it and inspect it and see if I find anything suspicious. Everything looks to be okay here. I can see a little bit of wear on the aluminum housing. I can also see just a little bit of embedded material here near the shaft. I can just about feel that there's not the smoothest of the surface here, but I think that this oil pump is still usable. Now I'm going to carefully remove the rotor, and I don't want to mix up the vanes. And it should just come out like this. The ring doesn't seem to be in too bad of a condition. There are some marks here. I can actually just about feel it with my fingernail. Not sure about this. It's probably still usable, but I can feel it with my fingernail. I got this piece a little bit out of the housing. There are actually two springs here that are quite strong, and I'm not sure if I will be able to reassemble it. If I try and clean it now, I think I can do a pretty good job without removing this piece. If I take a look here, I can see a little bit of copper pieces there and a little bit of debris. Also on this inside surface I can see some scratches, and yeah, I can just about feel them with my fingernail. So the final judgment is that I think I can reuse this pump. I think I also am taking a bit of a risk here. I think it should work. Okay, now I'm going to give this a good clean and reassemble it. Okay, I'm done with the bottom end of this engine. Now I'm going to turn it around and check the top side. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, I already did the diagnosing and I removed the valve cover doing that procedure. So I already removed all of the top parts. So if you need to see how to get to this stage, I'm going to put the link down below and up in the card. So now I'm just going to remove the valve cover. Next I'm going to remove the chain, and to do that I'm just going to pry apart at the junction here and take out this top part together with the chain. And it's out. Next I have to remove this plastic slide rail, and to do that I have to first remove the two plugs on the front side. So here's the top one and here's the bottom one next to the pulley. After I remove them, I can remove the journal bolts that hold the slide rail. Now I'm going to remove the cams again. I've cleaned up the cylinder head a little bit so we can see the damage, and yeah, so this side of the cylinder head doesn't look to be in too bad of a shape. All of the races are pretty much nice and smooth, so nothing that catches the fingernail. Let's check the intake side. Yeah, it's pretty smooth, surprisingly smooth. So I have a little bit of a scratch here. I can feel it with my fingernail, but I don't think this is too bad. Let's check the front races. Here you can see a little bit of embedded material on the race surface. So I will definitely try and buff this out. And here is the ledge for the VANOS seals. It doesn't look to be in too bad of condition. So the cylinder head is in surprisingly good shape given the damage that this engine sustained underneath. Here are the camshafts, and here the story is not as good. So there are plenty of scratches on the race surfaces, and some of them are pretty deep. I can definitely feel that with my fingernail. So the exhaust side is definitely the worst. So surprisingly much more damage here than on the cylinder head, at least on the bottom side of the cylinder head. So it's not ideal. I will definitely try and polish this out. Maybe this is just the remains of the softer materials from the bearing shells. Maybe some copper and some lead is baked onto the top of the camshafts, because the camshafts are pretty hardened. Yeah, not very good, but maybe they are salvageable. And here are the bearing shells. So yeah, not a very good picture over here. So as you can see, there's plenty of scratches on the surface, and the fingernail definitely catches this. So I think that this can be pretty problematic, because the bearing shells are mated with the cylinder head and they are lined bored, and you cannot just use these bearing shells from another cylinder head because it will not fit. And that's why they are marked here at the top. E4, that's the number 4 on the intake, and you also cannot switch them around. So this is very, very problematic. If you have damage here, you might have to scrap the cylinder head. So these two are the worst. I'm not sure if this is reusable. Well, here is the bracket for the high pressure fuel pump that is mounted on the exhaust side, and here the picture is not that bad. There are a couple of scratches, but overall it's kind of smooth. So I think that this is still usable. And here on the front bearing shell, well, there aren't any big scratches. I can see that there is a little bit of embedded material on the surface. So let's check the other side. Yeah, there's more material here. But it doesn't look like there are severe scratches. Nothing that catches the fingernail. I think that maybe, potentially, this can be saved with some polishing. If this is the softer metal, like lead and copper, then maybe this can be polished out, or maybe it will actually buff out. I'm not sure. I'm going to remove the chain tensioner next. Oh, wow, that was not even tight. Very suspicious. Let's check the chain tensioner. So it is from BMW, so this could still be the original chain tensioner. And by the code ending in 680, I know that this is not the latest revision of the chain tensioners for these engines. So there was another revision in 2016, and I think that the latest revision is even stiffer, because I can quite easily compress this. It's not like it's really weak, it's just not the latest version. So I think this is still original. Now I'm going to remove the rocker arms and I'm gonna label them and make sure that if I reuse this cylinder head, that all of the rocker arms go back into their initial position. To remove the cylinder head, I now have to remove all of the remaining accessories like exhaust manifold, the electric water pump, the oil filter housing, and of course at the back is the EGR, and yeah, let's get into it. Damn. Everything is off, so now I just have to remove the head bolts. Okay, let's loosen it up. And here's the magical moment. Let's quickly check the head gasket, and at first look everything seems to be fine. So there are no signs of a leak anywhere. So all the edges and all the junctions look to be in good order. Also on this side it looks to be okay. Here is the top of the pistons, and yeah, this engine was definitely burning some oil. This is quite a lot of carbon deposits. Now it's not catastrophic, but still it's quite a lot of baked on carbon. So you can also see that there are some signs of the valves, but this is not a sign of the piston hitting the valves. This is just where the valves come the closest to the piston. So this should all be pretty much okay. Okay, let's take out the pistons. I'm going to lubricate them with a little bit of WD-40. Now I should be able to just push them out. Let's check the cylinders, and there is a little bit of wear, but nothing out of the ordinary. You can still see the crosshatch, so this is all pretty much normal on this side. There's no lip, and I can't feel anything with my fingers. So this side looks good. Let's check the other side. Also here there are some shiny spots, but nothing too major. Even those scratches, you can't feel this with the fingernail. So it's pretty smooth. I think that this block is totally reusable. Let's check the pistons now, and of course the con rods are unusable. They were overheated and they're probably a bit oval. You can see here on the side that they are marked with 2 letters and they have to match. Of course, this is a cracked con rod, which means that you can basically just fit the same piece back on, so you cannot switch this around. Let's check the piston rings. So they don't look like they are stuck. There is a little bit of carbon, but I think that's pretty much normal. It doesn't look to be too bad. I've seen worse piston than this. Also, the piston skirts, they have a special coating on the side and it looks like it is slightly worn, but the piston itself doesn't look to be worn on the side. There are a little bit of scratches here, but nothing too major. So I think that the pistons can be reused, but the con rods need to be replaced. Let's check the number 2. Same situation here. None of the rings are stuck, so this is a good sign. And this is the con rod that is still good because the bearings were not destroyed. Unfortunately, I cannot reuse this con rod because all of the 4 con rods have to come from the same set. So this is basically just an ornament now. Let's check the piston number 3. Con rod, of course, burned out, but the piston rings, they are not stuck at all. Also the skirts look to be in good condition. And number 4, again burned out. Piston rings are not stuck and the skirts are not too worn. So I think that the pistons can definitely be reused. And finally, the cylinder head, and yeah, this engine was definitely burning some oil. There's quite a lot of carbon deposits on the cylinder head and on the valves. I am pretty sure that this is due to bad valve stem seals, because after 200,000 kilometers or about 15 years they go bad and the engine starts burning oil. These engines usually don't have problems with piston rings. So yeah, there's quite a lot of carbon here. You can also see that the intake valves especially have no carbon deposits. So I think that that's because they come very close to the pistons, and then carbon on carbon contact kind of cleans it off, like if you have some sandblasting medium. So none of the valves seem to be in bad condition. So I'm going to do a quick test, and I'm gonna put a little bit of WD-40 inside of the exhaust ports, and then I'm gonna see if I get any leaks. Let's do the cylinder number 4 first. So far so good, no leaks. So I'm gonna do the rest of the exhaust valves and see what happens. No leaks so far, so I think that the exhaust side is okay. No leaks, nice. Now let's do the same for the intake side. So it's been 5 minutes, and I think there's just a little bit of a leak going on the cylinder number 1 on the intake side. You can see that there's just a little bit of weeping on the side of the valves, but I don't think this is anything too worrying. So I think if I just lap the valves on this cylinder head, it should be usable. So let's conclude this investigation. So what happened is the little plastic piece here at the bottom of the chain rail broke off, and this is due to 2 factors. The first most important factor is that this plastic gets brittle over time, and it's very easy to crack. It actually broke on several places already. And the second factor is the chain tensioner. The chain tensioner can be a bit too soft, and that causes the chain to have a little bit of a slack. And when you start the car, when you start the engine, that slack causes the chain to break this little piece. And once that happens, the little pieces get sucked up in the oil pickup, and they clog up the oil pickup mesh. And that in turn causes the oil starvation in the engine. We can see that the main bearings are in a pretty good and totally usable condition, but the conrod bearings are totally destroyed. And that's because there's a little channel here on the upper bearing shells. So the main bearings get enough oil to be lubricated, but all of the debris gets squeezed into this little channel, and that of course blocks the oil passage from here to the conrod bearings, and the conrod bearings get the oil directly from a hole in the crankshaft. And you can see this wire here, so there's an oil channel, and when these get clogged, the conrod bearings have no chance. Eventually, there was so much material in the system that the oil filter gave up and developed a serious hole, and that caused even more debris to come into the system, and this is what scored the camshafts and the camshaft journals, and eventually the VANOS solenoids got totally clogged up, and also the VANOS units got clogged, and it could no longer keep timing. And I also think that the chain jumped, because when I tried to remove the camshafts, I could not insert the locking tool. The moral of this story is, don't let this happen to your engine. So if you can, make sure you replace the plastic rail guide, and also replace the chain tensioner with the newest revision. And if you do that, then you will definitely avoid all of these issues. Now, these engines have some issues with the injectors, but that's a whole nother issue. but at least you still have the core engine. But if this happens to you, and trust me, I've seen this a lot, then you can say goodbye to your engine. But now let's get back to the main story, and that is to get this BMW 1 Series back on the road with a working engine. So I've tried and find a used engine for this car, but I was not able to do it. So they were really expensive or they were not working at all. So these engines do break down quite a lot. But based on this teardown, I think I can rebuild this engine. Now there are some challenges. So the first challenge is to source good parts. I will definitely have to get a new crankshaft, and I will also have to get new con rods. I will also try and polish the camshafts and see if this buffs out. I hope it does. I will also have to find a solution for the scorn camshaft bearing shells. Yeah, they don't look so good, but I have a cunning plan and maybe it will work. I will also have to do a massive cleanup job and clean all of the channels in the cylinder head and the engine block. So it's gonna be quite a project. I'm going to make a video series on how I rebuild this N43 engine. And I already have some parts. So I have the new crankshaft here. I also have con rods from the same engine, and I have some ideas on how to put everything together. So subscribe if you are interested. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing. Keep Zen and continue the art of BMW maintenance. This is getting out of hand.